I'm Brett Wellborn. We are Quorum Labs. So we're going to be talking about enterprise-class site recovery solutions for the mid-market. That entails all kinds of things for your servers, from backup to failover, etc. And the first thing we like to talk about is who we are as a company. So our company is actually quite a few years old. We were spun off of another company, and then we formally launched our product called OnQ. It's an appliance-based one-click site recovery solution. We formally launched the product about a year and a half ago. So we're still a relatively new company, but we've been growing fast as a weed. We've gotten lots of awards on the product. We have customers in a variety of industries, from financial services to law firms, hospitals, manufacturing, energy, you name it. So first slide here, business continuity and disaster recovery, that whole idea remains challenging. We have some pictures on the screen, and unfortunately, you've probably seen in the news the tornadoes recently in Missouri and then today in Kansas. There were the tsunamis in Japan, the tornadoes in Alabama and elsewhere. There's always been that red oops button on there. But the point is disasters and challenges to business continuity have been around for a long time. This is nothing new. But very rarely do you meet people who will tell you that they have everything under control, right? And so here's a lot of the reasons why they don't. And I won't go through all of them, but some of the big ones are, just look how resource constrained people are today in the economy. Even if you're fortunate enough to be working for an organization that's growing, there's still a high likelihood that you're not being allowed to grow your internal staff as much as you would like. So you're continually being asked to do more and more with less. Well, what happens, right? You have to prioritize your job. So, how many people, this is a rhetorical question, obviously, but how many people don't have the time to test every single patch from Microsoft, for example, before you roll it to production, right? How many people don't have enough time to constantly test all of your backups, right? If your CEO gets the blue screen of death, that obviously that technical support issue has to take priority over these other things. And so those sorts of challenges remain, and it's part of one of the reasons why we're in business. One of our core goals of our product design and packaging is around simplifying things to help change this whole equation here. This is from a survey that a consulting company did of business executives, CEOs, CFOs, etc. So without regard to the whole IT topic that we just kind of opened up, it was just a question of, okay, well, if you have some sort of site disaster, how long can you be down before your business will suffer an adverse impact? So they're not really thinking about, well, how quickly can my IT people recover and rebuild servers from their back? They're not thinking about that stuff, right? They're just thinking about generically, if I have a disaster or the utility cuts power to one of my sites or whatever, right, how long can I be down before I have some sort of adverse impact? And 17% said immediately, 40% said after about an hour, and another 20% said after about 3 hours. So the point here is that an awful lot of companies don't really have like a push-of-the-button failover recovery type solution. They're basically dealing with backup only or backing up to the cloud. And so the idea of having to rebuild servers or recover from site disasters is going to take a significant amount of time, meaning there's a mismatch here between what the business owners desire and see versus what is actually being implemented. Again, another snapshot into the dynamic here that we're trying to solve and improve. So the next couple slides we're going to get into are, okay, well, what are some of the options out there? If a server crashes or you have a site disaster where you lose all your servers, like a power outage or a tornado, what are the things that people are doing today to insulate their business? Well, the first one, the most common one, is backup only, right? And this is something like Symantec Backup Exec or, you name it. There's tons of products out there. So a couple main challenges, right? Obviously, we'll back up your servers. One main challenge is, okay, well, if you lose a server, how do you recover? Well, the process of taking one of those backups and rebuilding a server, depending on how you do it, can take an hour, can take a couple hours, can even take a day or more. It's exacerbated by I guess I'll say, risk of what if the backups that you have don't actually work, right, for whatever reason, and that can exacerbate that issue even further. So you, again, end up with a significantly long time. You use an example of an Exchange server going down. You know, how long is your Exchange server going to be down before you can figure out how to recover from it? Another option out there for how to insulate your business is using the cloud, and this is getting more and more, I guess I'd say, marketing and press. And there's, in my opinion, there's a couple things that are really good about the cloud, but a couple problems that it actually exacerbates compared to backup only. So a good thing about the cloud is as your storage needs grow, all of that stuff is out of sight, out of mind, right? Your cloud vendor is responsible for expanding your storage, and yes, you get a monthly bill for it, but you don't have to maintain the infrastructure, you don't have to worry about it, monitor, track it, address it. That's a good thing in my opinion. The downside, though, is it exacerbates the whole idea of recovery, right? So up on the screen, we've got an example of the city of New Orleans. So they were using a cloud backup service, and it was no fault necessarily of the vendor, but they didn't realize that they had changed how they were doing their backups, and they weren't actually backing up the same way, their critical servers, the way they thought. So last, I think it was October or November, they had a major crash of their title record server. All of their title records were on that server. It died. They had no backup. So it took them 3 months of all kinds of digital forensic work and 6 figures worth of expenses to recover. More importantly, back to that CEO chart, the business aspect or impacts were tremendous. Nobody in the city of New Orleans, November, December, January, could conduct or close on a real estate transaction. So you can imagine what that would be like, right? So big risks out there, and again, it exacerbates the idea of recovery. How do you recover from a site disaster with the cloud? Well, you call them up and you say, this is what I need, and then they overnight a DVD to you, so you're at least down for that day. And then what happens if they misunderstood what you asked for and they don't send you the right thing? Then you have to call them and you have to go through another iteration. So in both of these options so far, the whole concept of high availability really doesn't even exist. And there's tons of flavors. We're just trying to hit some of the main high points. So this next one is kind of at the other end of the spectrum or pendulum. And it's this concept of replicated SANs. And I like to kind of frame this as, I'll say, the industry standard. And the reason I say this is the larger and larger customers that we talk to in terms of server count, 50, 100 servers, 200 servers, 500 servers, the higher the likelihood that they've already set something like this up, whether it's NetApp or EqualLogic or something like that. So they've put a storage network, area network in at their main site. They've got a second SAN offsite. They've set up replication. They've virtualized their servers. So they're running Blade servers. They've got VMware in there, et cetera, right? And you do have very fast, high availability with this solution. The challenge is the sheer complexity of it. And I'm showing a screenshot here of a white paper that's published on VMware's website. It's 230 pages long, has 700 lines of scripts. It doesn't mean that this is exactly the way that you would need to set it up, but the point is you have so many different moving parts that for an awful lot of people, it's way too expensive and it's way too complicated as well, right? So when you need it the most and your hair is on fire, so to speak, and the sweat's pouring out and your CEO standing over your shoulder, what are the odds that you could get something like this to work correctly with all these different moving parts? Again, another dynamic out there we're trying to change. So our product is called OnQ. It is an appliance-based, one-click site recovery solution. Look at the top right bullet point. It's basically like a replicated data center in a box. So what we're essentially trying to automate is a lot of what I just went through. Server backup, monitoring, virtualization, P2V, virtualizing a physical server, B2B, deduplication, etc., all into one box. Right? So if any of you out there have appliances for firewall, spam, systems management, things like that, hopefully this next slide will make sense. But the point here is simplification and also cost reduction, right? So think back to the replicated SANs. Well, you have to buy that storage area network. You have to buy 2 of them. You have to virtualize servers, so you have to buy Blade servers and VMware licenses, which can go any number of different directions within there. Professional services to set up the replication, etc. Again, there's all kinds of different ways to skin the cat. So sometimes there's WAN optimization products and all kinds of things in there. Well, what this is the old single pane of glass or one throat to choke, right? So if you use our product, if you're a customer of ours and you have a question and you don't know if it's just because you don't know how to do something right, or if something's not acting right in our product, or is there something corrupted in the database, or is it a hardware issue, you don't have to worry about any of that. You call us and we're responsible for everything, right? You're not going to call us and then have us say, well, I think it's a hardware problem. You need to call 1-800-ASK-DELL. Or, this is a database problem. You need to call 1-800-Microsoft. Or blah, 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 right? Fill in the blank. We're responsible for everything. We take all of that off your plate, and it's on us, right? You don't have to buy all those different moving parts and infrastructure I mentioned earlier. So it's a big simplification and also a cost reduction argument as well. All right. Now we're starting to transition into the technology. We have a couple more slides, and then we'll hit the demo. So the way that this technology works is there's a single agent that will live on each machine. And so from those protected servers, you would reach out through a browser and hit the OnQ appliance, right? And you may not be able to see it, but there will be a little blue button that shows up in the interface that says Protect Me. You push that button, and it installs the client onto the server for you. You then can control how often do you want that client to check into the appliance. And it can be as fast as every 15 minutes or as slow as once a day. And every server can be different. And we have 3 sample production servers we're showing you here. These production servers that you can protect, it doesn't matter if they're IBM or Dell or HP or a combination. It's hardware independent. It doesn't matter if they're virtual servers, what virtualization software you're using. Citrix Zen, Hyper-V, VMware, it doesn't matter, and they can be a mix. Our agent lives on the operating system, so all that matters is that it's a Windows operating system. We also happen to have Linux in our roadmap, but for right now it's Windows support only. Then those clients on that schedule will continually check in and send an incremental dedupe of whatever has changed on that server down to the appliance. The appliance will then do another level of dedupe based on what files it may already have from the other servers it protects, and it will create a complete backup of that server. Not just the applications, not one piece or the other, a full, complete backup of that server. And it stores that chronologically. So when you get in the interface here in the demo, you'll be able to see that you can go back through time and recover individual files and folders or full backups, et cetera, et cetera. It also continually builds not just the backup, but a complete virtual copy of each production server ready to run on the appliance. So the idea is you're humming along, let's say that this is, some application server or something, and you have some sort of hardware failure. You will get an email alert because that heartbeat, so to speak, between the client and the server is gone or broken. You'll get an email alert that you've got an issue with a server. And you can go over and find out, well, someone just rebooted, or do I have a catastrophic issue? if you have some sort of catastrophic issue and you know you're going to be down for a little bit, then you can go into the interface and click one button to fire up that recovery node. And therefore, the only amount of time that you're down is however long it takes that recovery node to boot up, which depends on that recovery node, but 1 minute, a couple minutes, somewhere in there will be that amount of time. And you're off and running again, and then in the meantime, that recovery node, which we're showing in green here, then becomes the protected node. So on that same frequency that you had defined, we will continue to take backups, but now of the protected node. If you end up having a catastrophic issue and you have to overnight order or second day a whole complete new server from Dell or HP or whoever, and you have to run this recovery node for 2 days, we're going to be catching all of those incremental backups along the way. And we'll talk about failover later, but you can do bare metal restore with our product. You can do incremental restore, individual files and folders. You have lots of options with us. So this first appliance we call the HA or high availability appliance. It usually lives right there on site where all your servers are. Typically, our customers have a second appliance called the DR appliance. Essentially does the same thing more or less, and it will live somewhere else. If you have a DR site somewhere, that's fine. We have customers like banks who will put their HA or high availability appliance where their servers are at one branch, and then they'll put their DR appliance at another branch as far away as they can get it, and they don't necessarily have a, quote, DR site. It's up to you. If you have any partners or resellers you work with, a lot of times they have a data center and you can put it in there. It doesn't matter. The point, though, here is that the same general process happens between the client and the HA appliance, as does the HA appliance to the DR appliance. So if you look at that multicolored arrow in the middle that's blinking, hopefully if the animation comes through, the HA appliance will continually send incremental, dedupe, compressed, and encrypted information down to the DR appliance, right? And then the DR appliance, therefore, is continually building those backups and those recovery nodes on it as well. So if the reason you lost a server is because a utility company errantly cut power to your main office, you can go to your DR interface and fire up recovery nodes there. And if you need to fire up all of your servers all at the same time, that's fine. We size these appliances so that you'd be able to do that. We have appliances with as little as 16 gig of RAM and 5 terabytes of disk space, up to 128 gig of RAM and 20 terabytes of disk space, 12 CPU cores, dual power supplies, 4 separate gigabit Ethernet ports, etc. Right? So these can be big honking appliances. So this next slide is kind of an architecture diagram. We've talked through it enough. I don't believe I need to spend a lot of time on it. But the one thing that I do want to point out is notice it says internal test network. So what we've been talking about is the ability to fire up a recovery node and keep your business running even when you have crashes and disasters, right? The other thing that's nice in our product is you can fire up these recovery nodes in an internal private test network on the appliance, which a lot of our customers love, because if you undertake a DR audit and somebody wants to come in and have you prove to them that your backups work and that you can test your backups, et cetera, you can do that. If you want to test patches before you roll to production, but you don't want to maintain a full set of standby servers just for that purpose on site, again, you can use it in this case. You can fire up recovery nodes, do all kinds of stuff on them, and power them down and blow them away, and it doesn't interact or interfere with at all your production business continuity and DR environment. Furthermore, We actually already do this in the product today to some extent for you. So we have a feature where you can say, well, at 3 a.m. every day, I'd like to boot up these servers, these RNs in my private test network, and we'll do that, and we'll send you an email with a report that tells you if it was a success or not. So this idea of auto booting, which will tell you to a certain extent, do these backups work, are they ready to run, etc., can be automated and done for you on a daily basis. One final comment, and then I'm going to pitch it over to Tom for the demo, is kind of a conclusion. So one of our big points of evangelism is the idea of with simplicity comes reliability. And so if everything's in one box, it's a browser-based application with a tabbed UI. There's no custom scripting that you have to learn how to use. There's no professional services. It's not multi-vendor with all these moving parts. It's basic web technologies like drop-down menus, checkboxes, radio buttons, right? So Murphy's Law pretty much guarantees that you're going to have a server die at 1 in the morning, or when your most senior person is out of town on vacation on the weekend, or who knows what, right? And so the idea is how confident are you if you haven't touched this in 3 months and your most senior person is gone, et cetera, that you'll actually be able to figure out how to get a piece of technology to work. And so it's that type of thinking that we try to keep in front of us with how we continue to build and advance our product. And hopefully you'll see that be borne out on the demo here in a second.
I'm going to run you through a demo of the appliance. So this is our interface here. We reach this interface through a standard web browser, and we just type in the domain name or the IP address of the appliance, and we're brought to this page. So if we do that from a server that we want to protect, we can just click this Protect Me button, and it'll download the agent onto the server that we want to protect. So before I get into the interface itself, I want to talk a little bit about the data flow that occurs when we do a backup and a recovery node build. So the agent will kick off a backup at the appointed time, and that time is configurable. The interval is configurable. So the first time the agent runs on the server, it will do a full backup using VSS snapshots. The subsequent times, it will do a VSS snapshot, take the changes, and dedupe those changes at the source, at the client, and send that data over to the appliance. So you have one full backup and then incremental forever with source-based dedupe. After the data is sent to our box, it's placed in a backup repository, and that repository holds backup from all protected nodes. So it dedupes the data a second time globally with respect to all of the protected nodes. And then, if you choose to, it creates a recovery node, which is a virtual machine that is essentially a clone of your protected node on the appliance. So at that point, that data is then compressed and encrypted and sent to the DR device if you choose to have a DR device. So it'll ship that over the WAN to the DR device, where the DR device will lie in ready state in case you have an entire site failure. So what you get is a high availability solution in your local data center for both physical and virtual servers, and you get a disaster recovery solution at your DR site. Now, we can protect any Windows server, Windows 2003, Service Pack 2, and up. So let's talk about the interface here. We have basically 5 tabs here on the HA device, and we see the role is HA here up top. These tabs may have sub-tabs associated with them, sub-pages associated with them. This is the landing page, the protected nodes page of the dashboard tab. We also have a little hidden menu here which contains the administrative functions of the box that you don't want to do inadvertently, so we kind of make them hard to get at. but you can shut down the appliance, stop and start protection of your servers, and reboot and such. So if we look at the protected nodes page here, we see a connection status right here, and the green up caret means that there's a heartbeat between the protected node and the appliance. So the appliance pings that protected node every 10 seconds. If it detects that the server is, if the server no longer responds to a ping, you'll get a red down caret here, and you'll also get an email that will tell you that there is a server down. At that point, you can go in and check and see if your server is truly down or just did a spontaneous reboot or somebody else rebooted it or what have you. And if you determine that you need to bring up a recovery node, you simply click this unlock button, and then you click the connection status button, and it will give you the option to power on the recovery node. So back to the tabular format, if I mouse over my RN status button or icon here, I see that the latest RN is available, the latest recovery node is available, it's ready to run, and there's some log information here that I can look at to diagnose any problems that may have occurred or what have you. My last backup was complete. It's completed successfully as denoted by the green up caret. It occurred at this time. My next scheduled backup is scheduled for this time. This backup transfer margin over here, I have two green dots here. The first one denotes the backup itself. The second one denotes the replication. So the first one basically measures the amount of time I have left in my window compared to the amount of time that the backups are taking. So I see here the average backup time is 5 minutes and 5 seconds. That represents about 1% of my total backup window. I get a similar result for the replication for data transfer to the DR box, similar type of information. If I look over the recovery nodes page, these are my recovery nodes. I can also see the status of the self-test here. So I'm doing self-tests. I can see that they passed or failed, whichever the case may be. And I'll also get an email that will report that to me, those self-test results. If I wanted to, say, apply a patch to a server to test to see if that patch is going to be friendly to my server, I could unlock this unlock button over here, click on the power state button of my recovery node, and as you can see, I'm given a choice. I can power it on the production network, or I can power it on a test network. And the test network is where I would bring it up in order to run my patch testing. When I'm done with my patch testing, I will power that recovery node down, and I'll have a choice as to whether to revert to the previous snapshot and destroy the results of that patch test, or I can keep it. Either way, I can't imagine a scenario where you might want to keep the patch after you've tested it, but if you do, then you can do that. So I'm going to go to the protection config here. When you first install the agent onto your protected node, it's going to pop up and it's going to ask you some questions. And these are configured when you download the agent, and they're also reconfigurable subsequently. So these are the questions you're asked. So you can set the backup interval, the retention time, when the backups start. You can disable recovery node auto creation. So if you were in a situation where, say for instance, you have VMware HA and you just want to use the local box for backup, but you want to do recovery nodes on the DR side, you could disable recovery node auto creation on the local side and enable it on the remote side. And that way you could use VMware HA locally and then use our product at your DR site. So if you want to disable protection for whatever reason, you can also do that. You can change the resources that are used by the recovery node, number of CPUs, disk size, memory, and you can also run pre- and post scripts for non-DSS aware applications. Say if you have a DB2 server or something like that that's not DSS aware, you can run a quiesce script prior to the VSS snapshot and then an unquiesce script subsequent to the VSS snapshot and get an application consistent backup. You can throttle the resource usage on the machine, on the protected node itself, and you can also exclude backup files and folders from backup. Okay, moving on to the self-test tab. You can schedule self-tests of the recovery nodes, as Brett was talking about. So what this will do is at the appointed time, it can be either at a scheduled time or after an update. You can crank up that RN, that recovery node, do a ping test on it, make sure the OS is up and running, make sure networking is up and running. In the roadmap, we may add application testing to that, but it's probably a couple of dot releases away. So from a retrieval standpoint, this is also a complete backup product. You can do file-based restores. You can go back to any snapshot that's held within the retention period that you set. You can go into that snapshot, restore individual files or folders, restore an entire drive. Also, PN failback. So we talked about failover, but we haven't talked about failback in detail yet, so I'm going to do that next. So we have three methods for doing a failback. Two of them work in the physical world if you have a physical server. All three of them work in the virtual world. The first method is a bare metal restore, and you can think Symantec Net Backup, Backup Exec, bare metal restore type of situation. We have a piece of software called Quark that can be put on a CD, mounted as an ISO, or put on a thumb drive, and you can boot that server and do a bare metal restore of it. You can also do an incremental failback. That would be the case where you, say, lost a drive controller and had a catastrophic data loss. But suppose you lost some other subsystem of the box and it was down for a few hours and your recovery node was running while you replaced that subsystem. We're doing backups of the recovery node. It becomes the protected node. So what you would do to do an incremental failback would be to find a maintenance window in your recovery node, get everybody off of it, get the box quiesced, take a final snapshot of it, and then apply those changes back to your original protected node, and you'd be back up and running. The third method, which works for virtual environments, and both of the previous methods also work for virtual environments. The third method is you could use XenCenter to do an OVF export of your recovery node, and you could import that into the virtualization platform that you use, be it VMware, Hyper-V, or Citrix Xen. Citrix Xen, by the way, is our hypervisor backend. I want to show you just two more things here real quickly. So now we've talked about HA and we've talked about the local box. In terms of doing DR, the way that we do our replication is it's deduped, compressed, and encrypted before it goes over your WAN, and you can limit your bandwidth. As you can see right here, there's a bandwidth limitation if you have QoS issues on your WAN and you, for whatever reason, you don't use throttling in your network, you can throttle it. So the last thing I want to show you is our catchphrase, the one-click site recovery. So let's say your, whatever reason, your primary site becomes unavailable. At that stage, you would go to your DR appliance, click the unlock button, and you would click this button, the link status button, and you would be given the opportunity to power on all of your RNs. That is the one-click site recovery there. It'll power on every RN on the DR box, and your environment will be up and running. So that's it for the demo.
So that's it for today. Thanks for your time. Have a good afternoon, a good Memorial Day holiday, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.